Hello, everybody. Steve Edelman here, and welcome to today's episode of the TCOYD podcast. And today's is going to be a really interesting day to talk to a parent of a kid that was just diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. John Mardikian, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Steve. I'm John Mardikian, and I have two kids. They're 5.5-year-old twins, and one of them was diagnosed when she was 3.5 with type 1.
Yeah, just a little over 18 months ago. And I met John and your wife here at the office when they were soon after she was diagnosed, and have sort of lived through this journey you've been on from becoming a lot more educated and finding the best therapy for CeCe. And CeCe's brother's name is George. So tell us a little bit about how your life was the week before she was diagnosed and what happened that brought you to the hospital or to the attention of a physician.
Sure. So we had 3.5-year-old twins. So life was hectic and busy and frantic, and we were in the throes of COVID protocols. So we had a pod and a teacher and with other kids, and things were busy. And I wouldn't say that we necessarily saw a lot of consistent, sustained symptoms leading up to her getting sick. But we went into Easter weekend 2 years ago, and we went out to a family home out in the desert, and we did all the normal Easter egg hunts, and CeCe was just unusually lethargic in the afternoons, and it was hot. It was 100 degrees in the desert, and you would hand her a bottle of water, and she would drink the whole bottle of water and then drink another one. And, you know, she's a 30-pound child drinking 24 ounces of water at a clip and then wetting the bed endlessly and all those things over the course of that weekend. So on Monday, we decided to take her into the pediatrician. I had assumed it was just a bladder infection or something, some kind of virus or something like that going on. And we went into our regular pediatrician's office, and the nurse came in, and they weigh her, and they take her height and all the normal things they do, and then came in with the blood meter just because they said, oh, she's been peeing a lot. And they poked her finger, and the nurse immediately walked out of the room without saying anything. And I knew. I knew that something was wrong. And the doctor came in, right away and did one of those hands on the shoulder thing and told me to get in the car and head down to the children's hospital and probably not to stop anywhere on my way, and that she would call. So we did that. And, we went through that exciting adventure of spending time learning about diabetes in the hospital. We were lucky she wasn't actually in DKA. So, we sat in the emergency room till about midnight. And then...
how many hours were you sitting in the emergency room?
6 or 7.
With CeCe right there with you?
With CeCe there with us. And I had taken her alone to the pediatrician's office, and then I called, and my wife obviously, packed a bag and came down immediately.
So what was it? How long was CeCe in the hospital?
I think we were there for 3 nights.
And then you were discharged, and so how did that go? 3 days in the hospital, and then you had to learn everything you needed to do to take care of her when she left the hospital. And in addition to what your experience was, maybe you can add in some things that you may have advocated for differently at that time.
Sure. So, it's a whirlwind of an experience to be newly diagnosed, especially newly diagnosed with such a young child. The 3 days in the hospital were really focused on teaching us stuff, teaching us about, how to manage diet, how to cover insulin, how to give shots, how to, measure doses, how to count roughly ballpark carbs. That's what it was really about. There was very little care that she needed medically, other than getting started on insulin. So the focus was really back-to-back appointments with nutritionists and social workers and all the doctors and all the pieces that go along with that. And, we were lucky to get diagnosed at this point in time when, the first morning they came in and clipped a Dexcom on her. And I don't think we've ever gone without one for other than the 2-hour warm up.
Well, I was going to ask you, did they put her on a continuous glucose monitor? And they spared her the 10 finger sticks a day, those tiny little fingers. And I think there's still the majority of hospitals in the United States do not do that. They just start telling people to prick their fingers and things like that. So did you feel they discharged you? Did you feel ready to take her home after 3 days only? I don't want to.
Yeah. I mean, I think we were certainly ready to go home. I don't think we knew what we were in store for. The pain and hurt and frustration and general brokenness you feel when your child is changed forever. Mm-hmm. It's never ending. There were so many times that my wife and I would find each other just shattered in different places around the house. And, it's a really hard place to be as a parent, and it's a really frightening and scary situation to be in. And, my heart goes out to everybody who's going through it now, but it gets quieter. And I have a list of things that, I've talked to with other newly diagnosed parents. And, there are things like you're heading home from the hospital with this huge box of stuff, meters and strips and ketone strips and Dexcoms and different types of insulin and different gauges of needles and all the doohickeys and bips and bops. And with the child, it's not realistic to think that a 30-day supply that's written for an adult is enough. So if you're going home with 3 or even 1 Dexcom sensor and your child weighs 30 pounds, the odds of that staying on them for 10 days is not realistic. And here's your newly diagnosed child and you don't have a backup. It's now 2 a.m. and it's come off them. So, there's some things you can do and think about to get ahead where you got to start building up some backstock of the pieces you use. But you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't know that unless another diabetic parent tapped you on the shoulder and said, "Hey, if you need something at 2 a.m, this is our address. Come over."
Well, John, you told me that when they discharged you to home, they basically had a follow-up appointment in a month, and they gave you a phone number to call to ask for questions. And I was questioning, how good that support system was.
Right. So if I remember correctly, they sent us home with this, I believe they call it a sliding scale, and it's sort of just like a set amount of. They sent her home on Lantus, NPH, and Humalog, and they send you home with this sliding scale where you take. I don't remember the numbers, but it was like 5 units of Lantus in the morning, and you take 2 units of Humalog, and then you take some big slug of NPH, and the next time you take any insulin is some Humalog and Lantus at dinner time. And it's a total nightmare. I mean, it was, and they're telling you to eat 25 carbs for breakfast, eat 40 carbs at lunch, eat 20 carbs for snack, and you're just dealing with unpredictable, crazy highs and lows, and the honeymoon nightmare phase where, our daughter's body was periodically firing back up and, producing insulin and going low all day and night. And then you're backing off and calling in 2 or 3 times a day to speak to the doctor on call, talking to the nursing staff, just the constant adjustments of it all. And being newly diagnosed, you have no idea what lever does what.
Yeah.
So you don't know what's causing the lows. You don't really know what's causing the highs. You can't, and it takes a lot of experimenting to get comfortable with, changing a dose yourself.
Yeah, and scary too. And CeCe, being only 3 years old, may not express exactly how she's feeling, where it was a clear-cut high or a clear-cut low. Now, John, I know I've referred several parents to you with newly diagnosed kids, and you've helped others. Is there any system that you know of where if they could have sent you and spoke to a support group or a couple other parents who have been through that, because I think you've been very helpful to these I'd say new couples of kids with type 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of our issue was we did this in the middle of COVID, so it wasn't a time when we necessarily had access to a lot of in-person community, with the exception of you who were willing to come and sit down with us. But yeah, I mean, it's a community and we need each other. There's no one else understands what it is to manage a child with diabetes like someone else who's managing a child with diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
And the fears and anxieties and the pressures and, the amount of time my wife and I spend sitting outside of gymnastics or ballet or soccer practice or whatever activity she may be doing, tennis, when other parents can drop them off.
Right. Like watching.
Yeah.
And, you're more knowledgeable now, but talk about the way that, well, I want to first ask, how did George do through this whole thing? Little George is sitting there seeing his sister, go to the hospital, and he's not getting much attention. And how'd that go?
Yeah, it was certainly hard for George because, we were both my wife and I were pretty tired and exhausted and emotionally spent. He is exceedingly grateful not to have diabetes, but
how has he verbalized it?
How does he verbalize it? He talks about the things that CeCe has to do. We don't hide anything ever about, having diabetes and the things we have to do about it. So, he's very much aware of what, finger pokes are and, changing pumps and sensors and, what that means. And he's actually very supportive. And, CeCe likes a big group hug with new sensors and pumps. So he gets in on that. So, he knows it's something that he doesn't want, but he's also very loving and caring of his sister.
No, yeah, he's cute. What about you and your wife? What did that do to your relationship? I mean, I'm sure in some ways stronger, in other ways just very difficult to spend quality time with each other.
Yeah, it is really. It can be really, really hard. There's very little space for us to spend quality time together when we're not, especially early on. Things are better now. When we weren't exhausted, and there was no one else that could care for our child.
Yeah.
One of us had to be on 24/7. She would take most of the days. I would take most of the nights. So it was very taxing and emotional, and you're roller coastering, and you're dealing with all this pain of what does this mean for our child, and where does this go, and what things have changed forever in 1 minute. And
will George get it?
George, yeah, sure. Will George get it? Should we start poking his finger now? What can we do? What can we, what are our options around testing him to see if there's something we can intervene on?
And you told me his diabetes antibodies were negative.
Negative.
Yeah. Well, that's tell us what you do to help safeguard CeCe. Like we have the Dexcom Share App, and some of our listeners may not even know what it is, so we can explain it. But also the Sugar Pixel. Yeah. So yeah, and because I know you have a whole system and how you deal with her going to preschool and how you do things remotely. It's pretty amazing, and I think it'd make life a lot easier for parents if they knew these kind of systems are available right now.
Yeah. So obviously, CeCe is on a Dexcom, and Dexcom, she has a phone. She has an iPhone that she wears in a fanny pack, typically under her clothes, just so it doesn't get knocked around, and so that's stuck to her all the time, although it just has to be in Bluetooth range, so it can just be in the same room as her or close by. And then she has an Omnipod dash pump, and we were currently looping. We wanted to be on some kind of a hybrid closed loop system, especially with all the hormones and things like that go on with kids. And looping certainly isn't for everybody, but for us it's been exceedingly successful as far as our ability to follow her, because it has sort of an overview I can see from my phone that shows me insulin on board, where she's going, when her last meal was, what her last bolus was, every adjustment it's made. And then on top of that, you can also remotely change overrides and enter carbs and bolus remotely from.
I didn't know you can do that.
You can do it. It's you have to get some help to set it up. I'm not a software engineer, but they're out there, and
so basically, she's at preschool. Her blood sugar is really high. You can give her a little bolus.
You can give her correction if
she needs it.
We typically don't, because Loop will typically catch her. She'll go higher than I would think, but it prevents me from rage bolusing.
Yeah, and I mentioned the Sugar Pixel. That's something that I bought. I haven't set up yet, but it works through the internet, Wi-Fi, and because Dexcom will only go to 2 devices, and typically your iPhone and whatever smartwatch. But yeah, it goes through Wi-Fi, and it looks like a little radio clock with the blood sugar and trend arrow. I saw pictures of it. I have one. I haven't set it up yet.
It's the best. I mean, it's like the size of a little nightstand clock radio, and it displays her blood sugar, the arrow, and then ours is set up so it shows the last change in her blood sugar, plus or minus however much that was. And in the middle of the night, it's a lot better than fumbling for my phone and knocking it off its charger and trying to unlock it.
And you can have as many as you want, right?
And it sets off the most horrendously loud alerts and alarms if you turn on, that there is no way you're going to sleep through the way I have occasionally slept through lying on top of my phone's alarm.
Do they go to the? You have to set those alerts and alarms, or they?
Yeah, you can set them. You can set them. So you can definitely turn them off.
Well, tell us what else, John. You've been now 18 months, and George is negative for the antibodies, and CeCe obviously is doing well. I know that you were pretty excited about trying to get CeCe on this new medication that may be approved by the FDA in November of this year, 2022, called teplizumab. And would you put your child through that kind of therapy to prevent or delay the onset of type 1? Let's say George becomes positive but no symptoms yet. He would be a perfect candidate for it.
Yeah, my understanding of teplizumab is that it's an infusion, and it's actually a 14. That correct? It's like a
14-day infusion of like 3 hours a day.
Yeah,
that's it.
Which is is a lot to think about for a 3-year-old. But the alternative, meaning that you could delay the onset of type 1 by several years and get that child up to an age or a body mass that is easier to navigate, absolutely, in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and all these other advances that are coming up pretty quickly these days. So I think that's important. The where you're at now, you're pretty comfortable. I know you guys still put a lot of time and effort in it. And what kind of recommendations would you give parents listening now of what to do if their kid comes down with type 1?
I mean, you got to get connected with another family that's lived with it. There is no better resource in the world than someone else that's been through it. And we're a community. We're really here. I mean, my phone rings at 2 a.m. I answer it. It's we all.
I
take
called
care
you
of
tonight. You didn't answer.
Well, that's you. Yeah. You have a different ringtone, Steve. But yeah, I mean, there's nobody that can give you better advice, and you also have to. You have to follow what you're comfortable with. If you're really, if you need the doctor to tell you how to treat this, then that's what you need. If you get to the point that you feel comfortable making your own decisions about treatment and what works best for you and your child, then you should experiment on that side. I really believe in health equity and access for everybody as far as the technology goes and the opportunities go to be on pumps, especially with the new hybrid systems that are, popping up everywhere. I'd find a hard case not to put a child on a pump sooner than later, versus me chasing my daughter around with syringes and vials and alcohol wipes and given how often and frequently she ate it as a 3-year-old, she would need 10 to 15 shots a day.
Yeah. You know what? You just reminded me. We really talk about how CeCe's handling type 1. I mean, I get the feeling she's doing pretty well. She's got great parents, obviously, and a supportive brother, but that's a lot to go through when you're 3 years old. Maybe it's better than when you're a teenager.
We'll still be managing it when she's a teenager. But she handles it really well. She has the most pleasant temperament, and she hangs with it. She'll put up with all the pump changes in the middle of the night and the glucose tabs and the juice boxes and all the highs and lows that go along with it. But we work, my wife and I work really hard to have it not be something that she carries. Today there's nothing that she can do about her care. She's 5. We manage it for her. So we don't hang her up on you're high, you're low, you're this, you're that. I mean, numbers are just numbers, and we try and have grace around them and for ourselves, so we don't drive ourselves nuts chasing highs and lows all day long.
It's a way of life for her now.
Totally, yeah, and it always will be. She's going to spend plenty of years managing this 24 hours a day. So if I can protect her from having to deal with it today, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think when it comes down to picking a physician, we did a podcast that I'm not sure by the time our listeners are listening to this podcast, it's already on, but it should be up in December of 2022. Monsi Jamin, and you don't know her. She's a pediatric endocrinologist from Boston. She joined a local biotech company, and I asked you to watch it, and you said she was awesome. And I think, what kind of qualities would you love to have in a pediatric endocrinologist that helps you bring your kid into the world of diabetes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you really have to have the right, you have to jive with them, and you have to have the right banter with them, and you have to have the right communication, that they're bringing you opportunities and options around care. They're talking to you about what's new and next and available, where your successes are. They know how to go and read through your Dexcom history. They know how to go and read through, your loop settings. You need somebody that's extremely familiar with whatever treatment therapy you choose to pursue, and that's not always the case, but they're out there.
Yeah, because I know that having CeCe on this looping hybrid closed loop system, which is not an officially FDA approved system, you might get pushback from some doctors that are, quite frankly, stuck in the mud and not willing to listen to other options. So I think that's a good point. Well, I tell you what, John, one of these days in the not so distant future, I'd love to have George and CeCe on a podcast.
Oh, they love that.
We'll get it all set up. We'll ask questions. I think it would be the funniest thing. And years ago, I did a thing. Kids with diabetes say the sweetest things, and we didn't have good filming quality. And Eric wasn't with us, although it was an awesome experience. So it was the day when Bill Cosby had that show with kids. Kids say the darndest things, and I did it for kids with diabetes, and I did it in 3 groups. Kids that were CeCe's age. And that was the funniest group ever. And I'll just tell you one story, since it's right after Halloween. The parents were watching with a one-way mirror and soundproof. And I asked the kids, I said, do any of you guys cheat on candy? She goes, oh, yeah. I got this big bowl upstairs. My parents don't know where it is. And then the parents were laughing so loud it went through the soundproof wall. So it was cute. Well, listen, John, thanks for joining us today and sharing your experiences with us.
Yeah, Steve, I'm so grateful for all the work that you guys do and all the content you share. And you've been an incredible resource for our family, and I know for so many others as we we navigate how to lead a wonderful, normal, happy life while also managing our diabetes.
Appreciate that very much. All right. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Steve.